Welcome, everybody. As Dina said, my name is Jen Marks. I'm the campus dean, and I have the pleasure of interacting with our students here in San Luis Obispo, and also have been running for the past few years a series of panel discussions called Exploring Careers in the Law. And we've had all different kinds of topics. Tonight, we're going to be exploring a career in the practice of criminal law. And that's a topic that students are really interested in. And the idea of doing this came from the students, so hats off to them. I'd like to just let you know that our panelists are Kate Seacrest, who's a Deputy District Attorney here in San Luis Obispo, and Attorney Jeffrey Stein, who's a criminal defense lawyer. And I'm going to let them actually introduce themselves more fully. So with that, I'd like to just start off. I mean, the purpose of these panel discussions really, as I said, came from the students say, how do people who are successful attorneys, how do they get there? What's their career path? And so that's what we're going to be exploring this evening. So I'm going to start out with Kate Seacrest. And if you could please just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your background, and then kind of your job description, like what do you do now and what have you done during your how did you ever become a deputy district attorney?
That's a good question. Thank you for having me. This is great. So my name is Kate Seacrest. I'm a deputy district attorney in San Luis Obispo, and I've actually been one for about 24 years. I have to say, just right off the top, that the views that I'm going to talk about are strictly my own. I'm not representing my office in terms of policies or procedures or certainly particular cases. So thank you for letting me get that in. My current assignment I've had for about 3 years is I'm a member of what we call the MDO team. So we handle the offenders with mental disorders. These are folks that have gone to prison for violent offenses, and somewhere along the line, they've been sentenced to prison. And during that time, they've been flagged for having a serious mental disorder. The question has been raised. They've had treatment, and ultimately, when they're ready to parole and go into the community, instead of doing that, the state designates that they could qualify as this type of offender. So they're sent into a system to be evaluated by a number of doctors. Ultimately, they're evaluated by a doctor up at ASH, Atascadero State Hospital. And then if they meet 6 very particular criteria, then the state wants to see if they can civilly commit them. And the point of the law is twofold. It's to give offenders a chance to become stabilized and get their serious mental disorder under control. But the flip of that, it's also to ensure community safety. We get some very crazy cases with people doing things unintentionally, but when they're symptomatic, there can be some very serious consequences. So that's what I'm doing now. And I do about 80 court trials a year and about 2 to 3 jury trials, which keeps it fun. Dean Marks, do you want me to go into my background or do you want to go over to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Just, if you could just tell us, like, your background a little bit.
So as I said, I've been doing this 24 years. I've had a lot of different assignments in the office. I originally came over here from Fresno, where I was working as a district attorney there, a deputy DA. And I came because they had a grant open for what they called statutory rape vertical prosecution. So basically, I was hired as a contract attorney, which, now that I think about it, was pretty iffy, but it worked out. So what I did is I prosecuted many, many cases of sexual contact between minors and adults. And it really ran the gamut, from some that you would say doesn't sound that serious, and some very, very serious that actually would have qualified for a forcible rape type of case, but there was a evidence problem, as there often is. So it came to me. So I did that for about 5 years, which was a year or two too many, I think, because it's kind of traumatic to deal with those cases. And anyway, after that, I came over and did misdemeanors for a number of years. And I've been on the narcotics assignment, which was actually pretty fun back when those were prosecuted as more of a niche. And one thing about the narcotics that was fun is I mean, you feel like you're accomplishing something in terms of the large drug busts. I had a jury trial in Grover Beach that involved a house where a number of people had overdosed. So the whole neighborhood appreciated that we were trying to step in and get this person under control. That's not so much a niche anymore, obviously, with the new drug laws. I did general felonies as well, a lot of serious assaults. And as I said, I'm now at Ash. So my background is I went to UCSD for undergrad. I was a literature major and an art minor. I went to Santa Clara for law school. And I started off in Fresno. I don't think I really knew what I was getting into, but I worked at the would be the conflict public defender's office. So it's not the regular established public defender. It's a smaller firm that takes all the cases that the public defender conflicts on. So that was during a time when 3 strikes had just happened. And there was an awful lot of however you charge them, very serious cases, drive-by shootings, a lot of attempted murders, things like that. I didn't really do that many jury trials, but I did a lot of prelims. And after 2.5 years of that, I went over to the Fresno DA's office for just a year. One thing I would say is that the alternate public defender gave me a lot of experience with hardcore cases, but also really, no matter whether you would go into a defense criminal law career or a prosecution, I personally think you have to have good people skills and genuinely care about people. And so that applies whether you're helping a defendant or a victim, in my opinion.
Okay, well, thank you. We're going to turn it over to Jeffrey Stein now and hear from him about what he does and his background, his career background, the kinds of things you've done before.
Great.
Jeffrey?
Well, it's nice to be with everyone and share a little bit of the experience. So December 18th was 45 years that I've been practicing criminal law. I got to San Luis Obispo in 1980 and have been here ever since. Criminal defense is a different kind of experience in that I grew up selling shoes going to college, and people always thought that it was dealing with the lower part of the human experience to sell shoes. People have the same view of criminal defense, that it's dealing with struggling people. And in fact, there is a lot of struggle, but it is an opportunity to make a difference, do some good, be creative, and experience the range of human circumstances. If you notice, there are relatively few TV shows about the wills and trust practitioners. There's a lot of them about the criminal world, and it's because it's more vital, more exciting, has a greater degree of human impact. How I got to the work is a kind of a background story. I was recruited by a PE teacher in 7th grade to do a public speaking class. And I stuck with public speaking in high school and college. I liked student government. So public policy issues that student government brought to the fore blended with the 60s when I grew up, where Vietnam was a significant issue. And so it was, being a criminal defense lawyer is a lot like being an anti-war protester. You're resisting the government and making them do what they have to do in a responsible way. I served 5 years as a public defender in San Bernardino County in an area where opiates were, in a prior iteration, the predominant drug problem of the time. And what that offered was an opportunity to deal with people who needed support, help, guidance, direction, treatment, when it wasn't the primary way in which the system dealt with criminal offenders. I've also had, because I'm interested in policy issues, I've been actively involved in a volunteer criminal defense attorney statewide organization really for about 35 years, and involved in legislative developments. So that process is something that is available if you're interested in why the law is as it is and you want to see it evolve in a different direction. That provides an opportunity for you to contribute and impact not just what the law is when you go into court, but what the law will become as it evolves through the legislature. It is a well-known feeling for most, the expression that for those who love sausage in the law, you should never watch either being made. But in fact, being involved in the creation of the law is actually an empowering and satisfying role. You can make huge differences. In the organization that I've been involved in, the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, has an active legislative presence and contributes significantly to many of the reforms that we see in the law. I think, you know, probably the question you want to ask yourself is what makes you happy? And when you figure out what makes you happy, try and figure out a way to integrate that into your employment. And a lot of times, although the work is very challenging and demanding, the feeling is that it's really fulfilling. And so I say to myself oftentimes, you know, I'd do this for free if I had the opportunity to do it. And it's because the work nurtures me. I feel like most days I feel more fulfilled, more comfortable, and happier when I go home at the end of the day than I did at the beginning. So I think the criminal defense part would be fulfilling for anybody to undertake if you like helping people and get some satisfaction out of it.
Thank you. That's wonderful. We're going to go back to Kate Seacrest, the Deputy District Attorney, and ask about your path to law school and how you decided to actually go to law school and become a lawyer, and focusing also on that, the decision point when you had to try to figure out how you wanted to, what area of practice really appealed to you.
Let's see. I have sort of a similar story as Mr. Stein in terms of I liked public speaking. I was a big arguer in my family. I had certain relatives that were always up for a debate, and they kind of instilled that in me. In high school, I was on the academic decathlon team, and I won a countywide speech contest that came with a scholarship. So it made me think that something to do with speaking and writing probably made sense. And to be fair, I also have somewhat of a family background in my past, my mom's side, of pretty severe poverty. And the reason that is important is just, I think I genuinely was looking for a career that seemed like it would be financially secure. So when I was at Santa Clara, they have a certificate in public interest. So I did a number of things. Just, I think there's a lot of similarities actually between criminal defense work and prosecution. At least there have been for me. And I interned at the Public Defenders in Santa Clara when I was in school. And I also helped at the Legal Aid Foundation in San Diego for one summer. And I just really think that caring about people and understanding the situation they're in and what you can do, you know, to make things better, it really applies whether you're helping someone who's been charged with a crime, you know, or a victim. And I feel I spent quite a bit of my time as a defense attorney in Fresno helping folks that were like first-time drug offenders, getting them into treatment. You know, what can we do to make this so you don't have to do a bunch of jail time, things like that. And so,
Well, thank you.
I don't know, does that answer your? So honestly, when I was applying after law school, I applied to a number of public defenders. And so this is just sort of this, you know, route that I ended up taking. So I guess I feel like it's two sides of the same coin, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, Jeff, what was your story? How did you decide to go to law school? And then
Well,
how did you end up in criminal law?
so the law school part was a combination of a television show from the 50s involving a very astute fellow named Perry Mason, who always seemed to have the right answer at the right time. And my grandmother had a friend who was a lawyer who a lot of the experiences I observed in his life called to me in a positive way. It was pretty much early on, I thought that was a career path that appealed to me. So from when I was maybe 8 years old, I went to Loyola in Los Angeles. And at that time, the lawyer that I knew the best was a personal injury lawyer. And I just had that as an expectation. And then the beginning of my third year, my best friend in law school called up and said he'd gotten hired as a teaching fellow for the university, for the law school. And the guy he worked for, who had a juvenile delinquency practice, needed somebody to help. And I said, well, you know, I'm probably going to do PI. And he said, well, you know, you can try it. If you don't like it, you don't have to keep doing it. And within about 3 days, it was a perfect fit. It felt like I'd come home to the 60s political stuff, and the evolution was completed. An interesting story, the first day of law school, there was a lecture by a corporations professor named Tim Kennedy at Loyola. And he said, I know you all think you know what kind of law you're going to practice, but I'm here to tell you, he said sagaciously, that the most likely kind of law you're going to practice is the kind of law practiced by the first person that offers you a job. And, you know, I think from my colleagues and classmates, that seemed like it became a very high likelihood. Once you get a developed level of expertise in a particular practice area, it tends to reinforce. And the people that want your work are the people that need that kind of service. So pick that first job carefully.
Well, that's interesting. I'll just jump in here a little bit. My first job was with insurance defense with Borton, Petrini and Conran here in San Luis Obispo. They don't have a branch here anymore. And it was answering, they put me in a room and I had to answer form interrogatories all day long. And this is another way that you figure out what you don't want to do, what you want to do or what you don't want to do. And I went, I really don't want to be an insurance defense attorney. So my next thing to do was to go to the district attorney's office because I wanted to be in the courtroom. I loved evidence, you know, and I love the courtroom. I just, that's where I wanted to be. And then I found out that my own personal response to alleged criminals and the natures of the crimes themselves actually, how do I say, I brought it home with me. I was not temperamentally suited. So I want to say hats off to both of you for doing this very important work of criminal law. I really admire both of you and everybody who does it. I personally couldn't do it. So I went to in estates and trust in estates and real property firm. And that's where I found it fit for me. And then I went out on my own 17 years, had my own practice. So everybody has a different path, but I do think a lot of the attorneys have said exactly what Jeff says. It's that internship, it's that first job, it's that contact with your legal community. So that's wonderful. Okay, so I wanted to just ask you about the social importance of what you're doing from your perspective, and how Kate had said you're really like two sides of the same coin. And also if you could talk a little bit about the constitutional aspect of what you're doing. So I think that is really interesting to a lot of people. I'll go back to Kate.
Let's see. So in terms of public interest or helping folks, I think I became aware a number of years ago when I had a high volume, like 100 cases a day in Grover Beach, and they're all misdemeanors. So it can be stressful because of that. And a lot of them are things like suspended license, which honestly, I didn't spend a lot of time really losing sleep over in the past. And then I started to get cases where it became obvious that, I mean, first of all, there's people that drive with suspended license repeatedly, and that's kind of a different area. But folks that get them suspended for not paying court fines or, too many tickets or whatever, can really be a downward spiral, and it affects their family, their job, going to school. So some of I guess the cases that I really, still feel fondly about is when I was able to say, help someone out that, okay, let's put this over. What can you do to take care of your tickets or whatever it is to get you that license rather than just giving you a conviction? And I don't know if I'm being very articulate, but what I'm just trying to say is it can seem like not that big a case, but it's a big case to them. And so I think that some of the most important cases can be, quote, the smaller ones. Aside from that, I mean, the other end of the spectrum, I am very concerned about sexual assault, and I think we've come a long way in terms of supporting victims. And so I think that's really powerful. And the cases I've had with bad assaults, whether they're sexual or not, I've definitely learned, actually with every case, when there's a victim, to be able to say, you know what, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm not sure what we're going to exactly be able to do about it, but let's just take a moment and acknowledge something bad happened, and we feel for you, and what can we do, moving on. So, and I'm not sure constitutionally what the question is, Dean Marx.
Well, no, I'm just thinking of, and maybe what Jeff can address this. Well,
Yeah.
switch over to him. The Constitution, I taught constitutional law here at the law school, and it's very, very important in the practice of criminal law. So Jeff, could you address that issue?
Sure. Touching first on the channel that Kate was dialing into, I think the quality that makes for good prosecutors and good defense attorneys is the ability to be empathic toward the people that you're providing help to. There are no small cases ever for any criminal defendants. They're always at the very pinnacle of the most important things that people struggle with when they feel the power and the impact of the state threatening their ability to live their lives the way they want to. And so what clients end up, for the most part, concluding is that if you care about them and that you're attentive to them, you're a great lawyer. Clients aren't really sophisticated about understanding legal nuance. So they want outcomes, but mostly they want the human compassion. When you get really good legal work on top of being attentive, then the clients are particularly gratified. A lot of times you'll hear lawyers talk about client control as a commodity, like you can go down to the Five and Dime and pick up a couple pounds of client control. And for the most part, my experience has been that what clients really need is clients sense that you are invested in their outcome and that they can trust you to do things in their best interest. And then they're willing to listen to your advice and participate in the dialogue. So that's all kind of part and parcel of the constitutional issue. Constitutional issue is when the framers created the Fifth Amendment due process, the Sixth Amendment right to counsel, the protections against cruel and unusual punishment. They're really saying that we as individuals need some tool to keep the government from unduly, harshly, aggressively, unfairly, inappropriately treating us. And so we have, as criminal defense lawyers, we don't have very much in the way of power, but we do have the Constitution as a set of resources to draw on. And it is empowering. It's creative. One of the things that you find as a defense lawyer is that you have to be creative. You have to think in a broad and diverse way as to how concepts from one area of case law might apply to another area to be able to improve the standings of the particular case. Those qualities involve inventiveness, and that inventiveness is probably among the most satisfying pieces of the work. One of the other things in the practice of criminal law that you don't see in the prosecution world is that you have to be either in a public practice or in a business that you run. So the businesses, you have to hire staff, pay rent, have secretaries, buy books. All of those things are part of the business model that practicing criminal defense includes. That isn't really something they teach at all in law school. So, a lot of people want to be in somebody's employ, but there's a fair amount of opportunity still in the world that we occupy for private practitioners to set up an operation and to offer their services. And it turns out that the more you are able to do good work and help the clients feel a sense of success and satisfaction from their struggles, the more you'll find work coming to you. It's, a community like San Luis Obispo doesn't really depend on advertising. It depends on word of mouth a great deal and how much people find you to be comforting in solving their problems. So those are all kind of practical issues. In terms of the Constitution, we have an evolving Constitution in California. 1982, the voters enacted Proposition 8, described as the Victims' Bill of Rights. There was a swing of the pendulum when that time period was going on. So the Constitution shifted with Governor Duke Majan for 8 years, got to be more aggressive, more people in prison. Now we're moving toward drugs being misdemeanors or not crimes, judges having the ability to divert cases because they think it's appropriate to do so in a much broader way, people getting treatment as opposed to punishment as the reaction. When I started practicing criminal defense, if you were charged with being under the influence of an opiate, it was 90-day mandatory minimum. That doesn't exist anymore, and the legislature has recognized changes. So the law in that way is an evolving state, recognizing some of the practical realities of our society and culture.
Well, thank you. So Kate, Jeffrey keeps talking about his clients. What about your client? Who are your clients as a deputy, as a member of the district attorney's office?
It's the people of the state of California. So it's everyone, I guess. And one way I think about it is when sometimes, well, this kind of all gets into jury trials and things, but sometimes folks will give you a hard time for, prosecuting what's considered, quote, a small case, like a vandalism or something. But it matters to the person whose house was vandalized, so we're all kind of in this together. And if I can just go back for a second regarding the Constitution, of course, there are Victims' Bill of Rights, and that is something we deal with more and more all the time. It can get a little complicated, but it is what it is. And for the most part, it seems like a basic good idea. If I was a victim of a crime, I would certainly want, the district attorney who's working on it to keep me informed of what is the defendant charged with, what's happening next, things of that nature. So anyway.
So the victims are not your clients?
Correct. Yes, and that can be.
How does that work?
Well, I was thinking about something. I guess I see a lot of parallels, obviously, between defense and DA work, but managing expectations is something I think of. So, how it works is, I'm tasked with proving the case, and I I need to keep the victim informed, and we have support, we have victim witness, we have a whole unit to help everyone and be supportive outside of court, inside of court, refer for counseling, things of that nature. But ultimately, using, of course, what I'm instructed to do, but I'm deciding how we're going to go forward on the case and if it's triable and things like that. So the victims certainly have a lot of input, but they don't run the show. So they don't get to, say what we're going to do on a case. I don't know. Does that answer your? And sometimes you have to, you try to explain everything. Most people understand, but yeah.
Yeah, when I was in the DA's office, I prosecuted a number of domestic violence cases. And at times the victims wanted to drop the charges. Have you ever had that kind of situation where a victim isn't really cooperating with you and you still have to prosecute? And how does that work?
Oh, well,
All the time.
I haven't been doing domestic violence for a little while, but so the general idea is that they don't get to decide. Yes, you have a right, and that might be counterintuitive to some people, and I know people can feel very strongly about it, but it's a community safeguard. We're trying to protect the victim, but also others. So, when I was in Fresno, doing misdemeanors as a DA, we would get guys that came in with like 20 cases that had been dismissed, and they were just used to coming to court and bringing their significant other. And I still remember a case, brought the woman in, her face is all battered, black eye. She said, I'm going to drop the case. And my partner and I are like, no, you're not. And so we weren't the most popular, but the evidence was clearly there. And this couple, it was as though their relationship was being, monitored by Fresno PD, because every weekend, he was beating her up, getting arrested. She said she didn't want prosecution, and it was dropped, and we weren't accomplishing anything. So the hope is to get them support and stop the cycle. So.
Great. Well, thank you. So I just wanted to make sure that we are talking also about how someone could decide if they wanted to practice criminal law, besides the lucky person who just gets the right job or the right internship. What kind of qualities and what kind of attributes do you think a potential attorney who practices criminal law should really have? And what are the pluses and minuses from your perspective? I'm going to ask Jeff Stein to address that.
Well, at the time that I originally thought about law school, I thought it was required that you had to be really brilliant. And what I realized that law school requires more than anything else, that you have to be really diligent. You have to have good discipline for how to use your time. And that, more than anything else, supports success in accomplishing things in working on cases, because there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of things that require divided attention. It's kind of like doing in the DUI testing, the cops always give the defendants divided attention tests, like can you walk and chew gum, or walk the line and keep your hands balanced. But that's really what practicing law is. You have to be able to do multiple things simultaneously. I think that persistence is another quality. How the world works in carrying out the work is you have to dive into it and get an idea. And then if it doesn't work out the first go at it, you have to figure a different approach to try and get that success that you're seeking for the problem solving. That seems like a necessary, challenging to be able to do to any confrontation or problem, but it's not obvious going in that it's persistence that becomes a way of reaching solutions that are helpful on cases. From a new law student point of view, I would say figure out what it is that you are drawn to and then find a way to participate in that, whether it's volunteering. In our office, we had students who came in and volunteered to be assistants doing research or doing investigation, just to be able to get the feel of the practice and the sense about it. And I think that was really valuable. It was good. You could see in their evolution, the people that were suited to it and the people that found it was not their cup of tea. So I think there's lots of places in town where you could find an attorney who needs some assistance and would welcome having an energetic student who wants to see what the practice is actually like. And then it works both ways. You get to feel what it's like as a participant as well and see if it's what you're cut out for.
That's great advice. So what do you think, Kate? How would you advise someone who is considering criminal law?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Jeff said, and it's funny, as I'm sitting here, I'm realizing I didn't have any internships in DA's offices. You know, my pre-DA training was, again, public defenders, and there was a really cool defense attorney in Fresno that I also worked in Santa Clara for a while. So yes, by all means, getting your feet in however you can. And it seems like that's, especially these days, a lot easier to get your foot in the door or help criminal defense than to, not that I don't recommend interning at a DA's office. It's just, I think it's harder and more limited. So, Dean Marx, you made me laugh when you were talking about when you started out at the DA's and it wasn't for you. I did a month as a clerk for a family law attorney. That was very bad. It was very much like, tell so-and-so that if he wants to really mess with his ex-wife for $1,500, we can do this, and I was like, oh my God, I had come from the discipline and the hard work at the public defender's office. And I thought we're not. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Well, good. I'm going to just open up questions now at this point for our attorneys. And let's see, I'm going to put the gallery view on here. Okay, the gallery view. I cannot see everybody. I'm just saying I only see a few people. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and then maybe Dina can let us know what that is. Do we have any questions coming up? Oh, and I have to say, please don't ask for legal advice, and don't ask about any current cases that are going on, because these attorneys have, how do I say, ethical constraints on what they're able to say. So, yeah. So do we have any questions, Dina?
Not yet. We had somebody unmute themselves. Joel, did you have a question? Oh, but he just muted himself.
No, I'm just a former student of MCL and I live in Sacramento now, and I'm just thinking about doing it online and going back and finishing what I started a long time ago. That's me.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I'm glad you can join us tonight. We will be having an information session next week. But if you have any questions about criminal law and the journey through law school, feel free to ask.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and mute you.
No problem.
So we have a question here. If either Kate or Jeff would have like a war story. This is coming from someone who is a community member here and seems to know quite a bit about the attorneys. So I'm going to start with Jeff, and I'll ask. Yeah, a war story. This would be a past case that was really incredible. So,
Well, let's see.
Without mentioning names, please, guys.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, one of the benefits, this may be directional guidance. One of the benefits of being in a smaller area rather than a big metropolitan area is that there's more work to do and there's less people to do it. So I started in a small office, 6 lawyers in San Bernardino County, and I was doing jury trials within about 2 months. I was doing felonies within about a year by accident, but nonetheless by the felony by accident story may be qualified to this. One of the experienced lawyers gave me a file about 4 inches thick and said, go down to the court in Chino and continue this case. I just got sent out to trial. So I walk in, it's a 2-defendant, 4 stolen brand new cars, trucks off of car lots. And I say to the judge, who was probably in his 80s, I'm here for Mr. X to continue this prelim. He just got sent out to trial. He said, sit down, we'll be starting in about 20 minutes. That was my first preliminary hearing, and it wouldn't happen very much anymore, but there you go. But I had—
He wouldn't let you continue the trial?
No, it was a prelim. He wouldn't let me continue the prelim, but I had probably within 2 years, I had a murder case in that court. And in the 4 years I was there, I think I had 4 murder cases. So it was an opportunity to get really serious case experience. So the lesson is small counties or smaller courts offer you opportunity to get better exposure and experience than being in the big city, where they do it gradually, probably more appropriately, but nonetheless slower.
Interesting. So Kate, do you have a war story?
I do, and somebody wanted to know our most annoying, and since having done thousands of cases, I think it might be more interested to hear like one that still sticks with me, which was in Fresno. When I was a new DA, I ended up with a child abuse case. And this is a 4-year-old who was being beaten severely by his mom's boyfriend. So I went to jury trial, and the mom tried to testify that it was, I think, Petey the pony, because the child had ridden the horse too many times and had been bruised. It was obviously ridiculous in that way. But it was pretty darn serious, and he was very, very covered in all sorts of different aged bruises, and I was able to call an emergency room doctor from Fresno who was on the death review board, so he specialized in dealing with children that had been actually killed. And it took, the jury deliberated for several days, and they finally convicted him. And one of the jurors said, but he looks so nice. And it's like, anyway, it was a big lesson, but it sticks with me because I feel like we stuck up for that little kid, and the jury did the right thing. So
good. Well, thank you.
Not funny, but it sticks with me.
No, yeah, I'll say one briefly. When I was in the DA's office, it was a domestic violence case, and the victim was trying to escape from from the perpetrator, and she went into a phone booth and was trying to phone 911, and he got into the phone booth with her and actually used the phone. This is back in the day when instead of phones like this, they were phones that were attached by a cord that had a handle on them. He was beating her with that in the phone booth. And what was so amazing, that was a breakthrough, was that there were 2 truckers who were in this gas station where the phone booth was, who saw the phone booth moving around like this, like jumping around. And so they went over to look in the phone booth, what is making the phone booth move around like that? And they saw this guy was beating this woman, and they managed to call the police and haul him out and like that. So that was just a real miracle that that someone had noticed, So so listen, we have a question from someone named Mike Kwan, K.
Yes.
W-O-N. And so Mike, will you unmute yourself and ask the question, please?
Yes, thank you so much. My question is similar to yours, Dean Marx, and it was the question about getting into the DA's office. And I think Ms. Seacrest actually answered it just a bit, but so after we graduate and pass the bar, can we just apply to the DA's office, or are they looking for us to start in private practice first, get some experience, and then apply? Or should we try and apply for internships during our third year to increase our chances of working at the DA's office? And then a second part to that question is, do they look for like past experience as opposed to like newly graduated students? Or do they look specifically at how well we did in law school in certain classes, or what we did specifically in law school?
Those are all really good questions, and without being on the hiring committee, I can tell you that so it's civil service, and they'll come out with a job announcement that they have an opening, but it's lately it's pretty unusual to see like what they call a DA1. So usually they're 2s and 3s. It depends though. I'm trying to think of anyone in my office that this doesn't apply to. Almost everyone has been in a different county and gained experience at a DA's office there before being hired over here. But I would certainly encourage you to have more and more internships and volunteer opportunities all the time, it seems like. So definitely if there was a way to do anything like that while you're in law school, I definitely would recommend that. And I don't know that they're looking at, law school records per se. I haven't really heard that. I think they're more interested in job experience. You want to like jury trials if you're going to be a DA, because they want to know that you want to get into court and you're comfortable there. So,
Okay.
we also have a number of folks that are veterans, so they've had different experiences in different armed forces. That helps.
There was another question about whether having a mental health background would help, would be a qualification if you had, say, a background as a therapist or a mental health worker would help get you. Would that be a good job resume from the DA's point of view, do you think?
I can't speak for who would be hiring at the DA's. I know certainly our victim witness unit has a number of folks with that sort of background, but that's not as an attorney, that's as an advocate or something of that nature. But I don't want to say it wouldn't be good. I just usually you see it in the victim witness unit, but it seems like it would be positive, but I don't
Sorry. So yeah, there's a question for Jeff Stein. They want to have a little more clarification. Are you a public defender, or do you have your own practice? Can you just explain a little bit more about the difference and how that would work?
After 5 years of being a public defender in smoggy Southern California, I came to San Luis Obispo, and I was the first conflict public defender in San Luis Obispo. I had that for about 5 years, from 80 to 85. And since 1985, I've been just private. So that means people or their families decide they want to get representation, and they come in and they hire us to handle the cases. When I arrived in San Luis in 1980 and I went to my first county bar meeting and said I was going to do criminal defense only, people laughed out loud and said, oh, you can't do that. You have to do family law and wills and trusts and personal injury. But the law has really become much more specialized now. So there are lawyers that just do subsections of criminal defense. I have one friend in Los Angeles who just does DUIs. He's very good at it, and he's made a career out of representing a lot of seriously charged and very successful people on that. And I think that would be an opportunity to find, again, what you're drawn to and to pursue that as an area of focus. Right now, my practice is primarily helping people who are on the sex offender registry to terminate their registration. California has, for the first time ever, created an opportunity of a broad base for people that are registrants to seek to terminate that. It goes into effect this year. I've been working in this area both legislatively and in my practice really for the last 35 years. And so I have a lot of experience doing that, and that's going to be a main event. There's a lot of offenses that are felonies, and they stay felonies unless you take action to reduce them. And that reduction is something I do quite a bit of, is to assist people to reduce their felonies to misdemeanors if they're legally available to do that. There's a improvement in your criminal record called expungement, which can be done. I do a fair number of expungement cases as well. So I'm sort of at the stage of life where I'm not doing trials now. My boss, my daughter who's here with us, does those, but that's the kind of practice I have, and some ongoing active cases, but mostly
Okay.
post-conviction.
So it's Stein and daughter.
No, it's daughter and
Daughter and Stein. That's wonderful. You're doing family law in a whole different way with
a whole
with your
different
family.
way. Exactly.
Wonderful. Good. Well, I think it's getting to be time to wrap up unless we have one more question. Is there another question out there? I don't see. Do you have anything, Dina? No? Okay. So I just wanted to say that obviously with the COVID situation, it's really a lot harder to for students to make contact with the general legal community. But if you want to, and I'm speaking mostly to the San Luis Obispo students here, but and any branch, if you do really want more contact with the legal community, reach out to your campus dean. That's myself here in San Luis Obispo, but Starr in Kern County, or the dean and president of the law school, Mitchell Winnick, up there in Monterey County. So with that, I think it's time to. Do you want to say something, Kate?
Just really quick, if somebody wants to ask more questions or more information from me, I'm happy to speak to them. So I don't know if they want to give their number to someone. I'm happy to do that.
Sure. Just email me at jmarx@slowlaw.org, SLOLAW.org. If you want to get in touch with either one of these guys, and I will put you in touch with them for sure.
Thank you.
So, any last words? Oh, somebody is saying thank you. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for participating.